na pangalan ng mga tao, lugar at organisasyon na may kaugnayan sa kaso na tampok sa palabas na ito ay pinalitan at binago. Ang anumang pagkakahawig ng mga bagong pangalan sa aktwal na tao, lugar o organisasyon ay hindi sinasadya at nagkataon lamang.
Huwag mong payagang ika'y tapakan, harangan at turakan nilang iyong darasang nagmumulang katapangan, kalakasan sa Kanya. Payagang ika'y tapakan, harangan at turakan nilang iyong darasang nagmumulang katapangan sa Kanya.
Ngayong Hunyo, may magbabalik.
Great morning! For today's video, we are going to discuss freedom as the foundation for moral acts. When we talk about freedom and morality, we sometimes think of Immanuel Kant because he's actually the one who proposed this particular principle on freedom and equality. And in the philosophy of Kant, he defined freedom as the right to control one's action based on reason, not desire. So it's all about what should I do. And the moral law here is knowing oneself as a free person. For example, I enrolled in the course BS Marketing. So here, the question here is, whose decision was that? So it's my own decision because no one dictates me to take BS Marketing. And also, no one forces me to choose this course because it's my own decision. That's why it's an example of freedom. However, freedom is closely linked to the definition of autonomy. Autonomy derived from the Greek term which translates into self-legislator. Basically, we have freedom and we have authority over ourselves. So, our practical reason is based on freedom. We are free, whatever we wanted to do, whatever we wanted to think, speak, decide, think, and whatever we show ourselves, because at the end, it would determine who you are. In Kant's philosophy on freedom, it says that it's not to live by the animalistic rule forced on them from birth, but rather to live by laws that you enforce on yourself. So, meaning to say, see freedom must be paired with responsibility and accountability. So, hindi porket freedom is wala ng parameters. Siyempre, may parameter pa rin when it comes to freedom. And sinasabi din ni Kant na freedom is absolute. Ibig sabihin lang, it's not limitless. Hindi pwedeng gawin mo lang na gawin yung gusto mong gawin because dapat may parameter pa rin. May sunod ka pa rin set na parameter when it comes to yourself. Because keep in mind that great freedom comes from great responsibility. On the other hand, there is only one inherent right, that is freedom. And it was according by Kant. And he says that freedom is the independence from being limited by the option of another to the degree that it can coexist with the freedom of each other following the universal law. And we know naman na si freedom is the basic foundation of moral acts. In theory and practice, Kant makes equality the first of three concepts on freedom. The first one is freedom of a human being as a member of a state. For example, let's imagine there's someone convicted in a crime that is not his fault. And mapapansin natin, may public lawyer tayo na tinatawag na tumutulong sa mga taong walang kakayahan magbayad ng isang private lawyer. And mapapansin din naman natin na yung mga rich person is na may kakayahan na mag-hire ng isang private lawyer is magkaiba sila ng estado, but they are same member because there are both human being. Parehas lang din sila ng rights and parehas silang may kalayaan kumuha ng kanilang mga lawyer. Second, the dignity of each person as a subject, meaning to say, to act autonomously is the manner that all human beings had. That special dignity that things and animals do not have, because we, as human beings, our rational beings, have the capacity to reason out, unlike animals or things. And let's keep in mind that to act freely is to act autonomously, and to act autonomously is to act according to the law that I give to myself. So, just like what I have mentioned earlier, I can freely do whatever I wanted, but make sure I will set my parameter, and every decision or actions that I will going to create and or make must be moral, because according to Kant, freedom and moral are one in the same thing. And lastly, freedom of any member of the Commonwealth as a resident. As discussed in theory and practice, freedom highlighted the autonomous right of all individuals to conceive of happiness in their way. In addition, here are the summary of Immanuel Kant's philosophy on freedom. The first one is, individuals have the right to choose one's conduct based on reason, not desire. So basically, only human beings have the capacity to determine their action because of their freedom, which is not present in other beings. Second is, individuals have to abide by the rules that they follow. Just like what I've said earlier, you can freely do whatever you want to do, but make sure you must set your parameters. That will be your basis or consideration for your next actions. Because always remember that great freedom comes from great responsibility. And third is, individuals are independent from being limited by the option of another to the extent that it may coexist with each other's freedom under universal rule. It only says that we should be morally responsible for the things that we decide, think, speak, or act. Number 4 is, equality is the most among the various freedom, and freedom is the only inherent power. It talks about the 3 concepts of freedom that I had already discussed earlier. First is the freedom of any member of the state. Second, the dignity of each person as a subject. Third is the freedom of any member of the Commonwealth as a resident. And number 5, individuals have an autonomous right to be happy in their own way, and the intervention of another's freedom means forcing others to be happy. So, it says that when you have your knowledge to do what is good, and normally, when you do good, you should be happy to what you are doing, as simple as that. Before I ended my discussion about Kant's philosophy on freedom, let me ask to you first this question. Why do you think freedom is the foundation of moral acts? So the answer for this question is all that I had discussed from the beginning. But to make it clearer, I can give you an example. Can you imagine a house without foundation? Hindi natin masasabing matibay ang isang bahay kung walang 4 na pundasyon. And sa isa ding pamilya, hindi natin masasabing matibay ang samahan ng isang pamilya kung wala yung guide ng kanilang parent, which is si mother at si father. Kagaya din po sa moral acts, hindi natin masasabing matibay ang isang moral acts kung wala ang pundasyon ni freedom. Kaya nga sinasabi natin, if there will be no freedom, there will be no responsibility, there will be no ethics and morality to talk about. Because always remember that freedom is part of human nature, and the exercise of freedom must be paired with responsibility and accountability.
Kant's ethical theory was founded on the premise that reason should be utilized to determine how individuals should act. Here are the main points of Kant's moral philosophy: goodwill and duties, perfect and imperfect duties, categorical imperatives, universality, humanity as an end itself.
Kant started his ethical philosophy by arguing that the only virtue that can be uncontroversial good is goodwill. Goodwill is unique as it is always good and retains its moral values, even though it fails to achieve its moral intentions. Kant found goodwill to be a common moral concept that openly wishes to use certain virtues for moral purposes. Duty is something that one is expected or required to do by moral or legal obligation.
The goodwill is the only good without qualification, the only intrinsic good. Kant described the goodwill as a will that acts from duty as a good in itself. The class of actions in accordance with duty must be distinguished from the class of actions performed from duty. Kant believed that only actions performed from duty have a moral worth. For Kant, the supreme thing on earth is the development of a goodwill and to act from a sense of duty. Kant believed that goodwill is the only thing that is good in all circumstances.
The perfect duty is always true. Imperfect duty requires flexibility. Kant believes that perfect duty is more important than an imperfect duty. When conflict of duties arises, perfect duty must be carried out.
Kant distinguished between two types of duties: duties that are both perfect and imperfect duties. Perfect or internal duties is a responsibility to oneself and is found in the doctrine of virtue, whereas imperfect or external duties is a responsibility to others and is found in the doctrine of right. As a result, there exist both perfect and imperfect responsibilities pertaining to the doctrine of virtue and the doctrine of right. Therefore, in perfect duty, it is must to do what is good, while in perfect duty, you do good, but it is not an obligation to do so.
Under Kant's philosophy on morality, we have categorical imperative. When we say categorical imperative, it commands unconditionally. It binds everyone has a responsibility not to lie, regardless of any condition or even though it is in our interest to do so. While when we say hypothetical imperative, it is the one we must fulfill if we are to satisfy our desires or command conditionally having our relevant desire. So, for a better understanding, kapag sinabing categorical imperative, it is non-conditional. We don't think of the consequences of our action. What matters most here is the action only, not the form or the result of the action. Kapag naman sinabing hypothetical imperative, it is conditional. We always think of the consequences of our action. Kagaya na lamang ng alam na natin yung result na ganito yung mangyayari kapag ginawa natin to, is iniisip pa rin natin kung gagawin ko pa ba to or hindi, kung alam ko ganito yung kalalabasan. Katulad na lang po ng gamitin natin yung crime scene. Ang nangyari dun sa introduction video ng crime scene na ginawa namin is si Manang Joy is tinatago niya yung totoo sa publiko dahil nga kapag once na sinabi niya yung totoo sa publiko, it's either may kapamilya na naman niya ang madadamay at dahil binabalaan siya ni Boss Charles na kapag nagsalita siya sa publiko or nagsabi sa ibang tao kung sino pumatay sa anak mismo niya, ni Manang Joy is papatayin niya daw yung iba pa niyang part ng pamilya. Kaya ang ginawa ni Manang Joy is nandun na siya sa case ng hypothetical imperative kasi iniisip niya yung consequences of the action. Kapag nagsabi siya na totoo sa publiko, ay mamamatay yung isa sa bahagi ng kanyang pamilya. At doon naman sa case ng categorical imperative, pwede natin gawing example dito si Boss Charles. Ito is hindi niya iniisip yung consequences ng ginawa niya na ginahasa niya si Irish kasi hindi niya inisip na ganito yung mangyayari kapag ginawa ko yung action na to. Hindi niya naisip yun. Kaya ginawa niya lang talaga is nag-focus lang siya talaga sa action niya. Hindi niya consider yung consequences ng action niya, which is ginahasa niya pero hindi niya inisip na sa huli is maaaring malagay siya sa alanganin dahil isa pa man din siyang konsehala.
Universalizability, an act is only permissible if one can have the principle that allows an action to be the universal law by which everybody acts.
Immanuel Kant recognizes the categorical imperative as the basis of morality. Kant made us to know that what can be said to be a morally right or wrong depends entirely on the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative was formulated in various ways, but the general point was roughly that one should act only in ways they are universalizable. The problem of the categorical imperative is largely those of universalizability. Universalizability theory is the idea that what is right for a person must be right for anyone else in the same position. In other words, one should act according to the principle of an action that can be universalized, meaning when someone commits a crime, he or she will be punished regardless of social and economical standing.
Humanity as an end itself. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means.
Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative is to treat humanity as an end in itself. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means. In the other words, humanity as an end itself of Kant pointed out that human intrinsic worth does not depend on something else. It does not depend on whether a person loves his or her life or makes other people's lives better. A human being lives so he or she has a value.
Kant's philosophy on justice and fairness. Kant comes to identify the institution of property with freedom because he sees it in a fundamental sense as an expression of the self, an object which he argues my property belongs solely and exclusively to myself and it is my right to consume or use it is whatever way I please. Indeed, so strongly does the individual feel about his ownership, Kant thinks that if somebody takes it without his consent, they harm the individual just as much as thought they had injured his body. From this point of view, the individuals threaten the individual's property in the sense of its being an extension of the self. Not only his feelings of well-being but also his very existence. First, justice is concerned only with external action by which one person can influence other people, whether indirectly or directly. Second, justice is not concerned with the desires, wishes, or needs of other people, This matter pertain to the voluntary virtues of benevolence and charity, whereas justice is concerned with whether or not we respect the equal freedom of others to live their lives as they see fit. Third, justice is concerned solely with the form of interpersonal relationships, not with their content. Thus, if I purchase a commodity from a shopkeeper, justice is satisfied if the form of that relationship is voluntary, whether the shopkeeper hopes to profit from the transaction or how much he actually gains. This and similar issues pertain to the content of the transaction and do not fall with the purview of justice.
Article 6, Section 28 of the Constitution provides that the rules of taxation shall be uniform and equal, and that a democratic system of taxation shall be established by the Congress. In 1987 Philippine Constitution, it only says that taxation shall be uniform and equal. Thus, uniformity in taxation means equity in the burden of taxation, which cannot occur without uniformity in the mode of assessment and as well as in the rate of taxation. Sinasabi din sa Constitution na to na yung property can be subject for taxation so that it would be taxed fairly and equally. And sinasabi din dito yung word na equity, which means yung equity, it is the principle that taxation should be equal and would be based on the willingness of an individual to pay taxes. And dito, sinasabi sa Constitution na yung pagka-tax natin is based on his or her salary with percentage. Kasi dun sa before, yung pinag-aralan natin na taxation, during our taxation subject, is pinag-aralan natin yung different individual taxpayers. We have resident citizen, non-resident citizen, resident aliens, non-resident aliens not engaged in trade or business, non-resident aliens engaged in trade or business. Pero in case po in taxation is before natin i-consider yung pagtatax sa isang individual is kino-consider muna natin yung source of income, which is the place or origin of an individual. Pinag-aralan kasi natin before na kapag resident citizen, ang tax base natin dyan is based on his or her net income. So ang scope lang nun ay yung income niya derived worldwide kasi resident citizen siya, kaya within and without the Philippines. So, ang ginagamit dito pag resident citizen is graduated tax rate. Kapag naman non-resident citizen, resident alien, non-resident alien engaged in trade or business is, ang tax base din doon is based on net income. So, ang pinagkaiba lang is within the Philippines lang, yung income derived within the Philippines. Ang ginagamit din dito is graduated tax rate. Kapag naman non-resident aliens not engaged in trade or business, ang tax base natin dito is yung gross income niya and within the Philippines lang yung sakop na pagtatax, and ang ginagamit dito is final tax of 25%.
Republic Act Number 8424 of the Tax Reform Act of 1997 was passed in December 1997 in the midst of the Asian financial crisis. Also set a 2% minimum for corporate income tax, imposed a final withholding tax on dividends, and increased personal income exceptions. The importance of it is to hereby declare the policy of the state to promote sustainable economic growth through the rationalization of the Philippine Internal Revenue Tax System, including tax administration, to provide as much as possible an equitable relief to a greater number of taxpayers in order to improve levels of disposable. Law of the Republic Number 10963, or the Law of the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion is the initial package of the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program or the CTRP signed into the law by President Rodrigo Duterte on December 19, 2017. The purpose of it is to ensure that the government is able to provide for the needs of those under its jurisdiction and care through the provision of the better infrastructure, health, education, jobs, and social protection for the people. The train aims to make the Philippine tax system simpler, fairer, and more efficient to promote investments, create jobs, and reduce poverty.
Layunin nito ang paghahatid ng mga batayang serbisyo at ilang gampaning nagre-regula sa mga lokal na pamahalaan na dating ipinagkaloob ng mga ahensya ng pamahalaang pambansa tulad ng kagawaran ng agrikultura, kagawaran ng kalusugan, kagawaran ng kapakanan at kaunlarang panlipunan at iba pa. Pinalawak nito ang mga kapangyarihang ukol sa buwis at paghihiram ng mga pamahalaang lokal at pinagkaloob ang mga ito ng higit na malaking parte mula sa pambansang buwis nang may isang palagi ang formula sa pagpaparte-parte. Gayon din, sa pamamagitan ng isang sistema ng grant, binigyan din ng kodigo ng pamahalaang lokal ang mga unit ng lokal ng pamahalaan ng parte ng mga kinita mula sa pambansang yaman sa kani-kanilang respektibo. The law in the Philippines covers national and local taxes. National taxes refer to national internal revenue, taxes imposed and collected by the national government through the Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR. And local taxes refer to those imposed and collected by the local government. The Tax Code of 1997, Revenue, Issuances, and BIR rulings pertaining to national taxes. 1987 Constitution. The 1987 Philippine Constitution sets limitations on the exercise of the power to tax. All money collected on any tax levied for a special purpose shall be treated as a special fund and paid out for such purpose only. If the purpose for which a special fund was created has been fulfilled or abandoned, the balance, if any, shall be transferred to the general funds of the government.